All right, good evening, listeners. Welcome to Motley Crude, episode 19. I'm Kevin. Glad to be with you guys this evening as we're going to be talking about the Renegade Pack, faction pack that was published by the team over at Square Based. This evening with me, I've got back from having survived the plague, the number one Dark Elf player here in Ottawa. How you doing, Andrew?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing great. I'm doing great. And then with us also, we've got, I think, probably Canada's number one city-state of null enjoyer. How you doing, Ryan?
I'm doing fine. How are you, Kevin?
It's it's a select group.
I know, right?
Awesome. So I'm doing great, thanks. So as I was mentioning there, this evening we're going to be covering the Renegade pack that was prepared and released recently by Val over at Square Based. We talked about it a little bit briefly during the last episode, but we'll be covering it in detail this evening. But before we get to that, though, let's do a bit of a round table and see what's new in everybody's hobby. So let's start with you, Ryan, tonight.
Well, I started building my city-state of Null army.
Nice.
Um, I might have a steam tank where the crew commander has a lance because
That's good.
why not?
Yeah, that's good.
And yeah, just been messing around with that stuff. Nice Empire models. Um, Hating the fact that I have to glue the polearm ends onto all of my individual state troops, but such is
Oh, they
life.
they don't come they don't come as one piece weapon, like the heads are
So
separate.
no, so it's
Terrible.
it's either a spear or a halberd.
Ah,
Dealer's
okay.
choice.
Okay. I see how that works now. Perfect.
It's not cool. Other than that, I've gotten in a couple games, not of Old World particularly, but we smashed out a game of Black Sails at the club here in Kingston last week. And
Nice.
just yesterday we played a game of Full Thrust, a sweet Space Fleet combat game from the 90s, published out of some British guy's basement. So that's what I've been up to.
Yeah, that's awesome. I was wondering. I saw them on your Instagram, the pictures. I was wondering if it was Full Thrust or some other space game there. I have fond memories from university of playing Full Thrust, actually.
Yes, we learned to play from the same guys.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. Good, good stuff. And no old world games at all. Your ogre
uh,
game
not
was that?
not not since I think that was before our last
Okay,
episode.
okay,
I
fair.
don't remember anymore.
Yeah, time is a flat circle. All right, good, perfect. Andrew, what's new in your hobby, man?
Um, I finished those dark elves I was painting like 3 weeks ago. Just the 10 crossbow dudes.
Nice.
And then I painted a bunch of stuff for my Escher gang that has been on my queue for about 4 years. And then I
Okay, good.
painted, well, I built them over COVID, and then I've just been doing other projects. So I'm like, "Oh, I'll get to it. So finally I did it. Then I painted a bunch of Vansire stuff that was kind of in the same boat. I think I built it like 2 years ago, and it's just been sitting on my queue shelf for that long, so I cleared that out. And then I built about 33 Gene Stealer cultists in various gear loadouts for Necromunda, and now I'm batch painting the lot.
Awesome. They're nice models. I in 40K I had a Gene Stealer cult army and I painted a ton of those guys. So yeah, they're good looking models for sure.
Yeah, they're fun.
Just like the neophyte hybrids probably.
Yeah, I don't know where I got one kit of the Neophyte hybrids. And then I don't know where I got it from, but I have like this random sprue. It looks like they're all like push fit or one build.
Okay.
So there's a bunch of those. I don't know what they're called. They're the ones that have like they're more gene stealer than human, but they still have like clothes.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
They have like 3 arms and like their hands are all claws instead of just like regular hands, and their feet are
Uh,
all
like the hybrid metamorphs and there's like a dual kit. Yeah.
yeah. So it was that, and then it had more neophytes on it, and then I have That dude with the 3 pistols,
Nice. The
that character model, and then the
yeah,
female Magos.
yeah,
And then
Kellamorph.
yeah, and then I don't know where I got them, but I got 2 of those like the Hulk looking guys.
Oh yeah, the Abominants.
Yeah, that's it. So I got 2 of
Yeah,
those I'm painting too. So basically I'm doing this all in one big batch and it's kind of driving me nuts, but I started it, so I'll just continue on with this path and never do it again
yeah,
and go
yeah.
back to
A lot
painting
more.
MS 5 after that.
Yeah, a lot more detail to paint on those than your Dark Elf crossbowmen for sure.
These guys aren't bad.
Yeah,
Really, it's like just closed skin, a couple things on their belt. Like I've painted worse 40K models for sure.
sure, fair. Okay, good stuff. So on my end here, I kept up with my painting of the Wolves of the Sea. So I think I was just about done a unit of Marauder Horsemen. The last time we recorded, that one's all done, done and dusted. I painted after that a Chaos Lord on Demonic Mount. He's basically an old Archaon model that I just sort of spruced up a little bit. I'm not even going to call it a conversion. It's just a few swaps there, and painting him up. He could be any kind of chaos character basically on a horse at this point. And then I'm halfway through another unit of Marauder Horsemen, so I'm progressing his speed here. It's good stuff. I also played a game into Bretonians. Again, my luck of always running into Bretonian armies continues. It was of course, Peg Knights and a Falconhorn and a pair of cannons, just the classic Bretonian list. I was actually playing a test game using the Renegades pack developed by Val. That was like the first sort of test game against another player I tried. It was inconclusive. A lot of flying pieces that sort of didn't really get to play because of the Falconhorn. Yeah, I guess I'll have to try that list out again in the future. I have a game against Danny in a few days planned, and then I'll probably have like two games planned over the next week too. So things are looking pretty good here. All right, let's. We're gonna skip over the news right now. There's not a lot of news. There hasn't been much revealed over the last week since we recorded. However, that's going to be changing pretty soon. There's a GW preview in about an hour where everybody expects them to be talking about and revealing what's coming up with the Beastmen army when it releases here in a few, I don't know, weeks to months. So probably next episode we'll have tons of news to talk about. However, this evening, or as I mentioned previously, we're going to be talking about the Renegade pack. So let's just start with a quick intro. I'll shoot this one to you, Ryan. Like, just give us the sort of who's who of what the Renegade pack is, what does it cover, and where people could find it if they haven't heard about it before.
Okay, cool. So the Renegade pack is Val Heffelbringer from Square Based with the support of a variety of people across the community, various discords, shoutouts to all sorts of names you probably all recognize from all over the place. Where it was just his attempt to address a perceived shortfall with the PDF legacy factions that were put out by Games Workshop. And so he, invested a whole bunch of time and effort, researching previous editions and just trying to, without breaking the game or really addressing balance or anything, just try to bring the Renegade or the legacy factions more into line with everything that was published ultimately with the old world, the physically published elements. Because there's a clear, like there seems to have been an obvious stopping point of work on the legacy factions where they downed tools on those, figured they'd put them out later, and continued tweaking things that were ultimately published. So anyway, that's the scope of this project. It addresses all of those factions in various ways, but none that are like earth-shattering. It can be found on the Square-based website and also wallpapered all over Facebook, Reddit, and probably every Discord that has Warhammer the Old World in it that you can think of. I think that covered everything.
Yep. No, I think that that did cover everything. And one of the things you mentioned is, they downed tools at different points on different factions here while they were preparing the legacy PDFs, and that was a pretty striking realization for me over the last few days as I was preparing for this episode. I had never looked at all the legacy factions in like as much detail as I have over the last few days. And you can see some of them were in a really, really rough space like compared to the others. Lizardman and Skaven come to mind as just having such a strange army composition list, for instance. So yeah, that definitely is something that I think needed a little bit of love, to be honest. So yeah, thanks for that, Ryan. So moving on here just a little bit. So let's go through. I think I'll start us off, but let's go through what our initial thoughts are on this pack writ large, and then what do you guys think of the approach that the creator, the Val, took when he was putting this together? Do you think it's the right one in addressing some of the issues that were that are plaguing the legacy faction? So I think I'll start here. Overall, I like what I saw and what I read throughout the pack. I think Val, and he's talked about it in a number of places already, and he mentions it in his opening remarks in the document too. Like, he took a pretty, I would say, a restrained position when he was dealing with these legacy factions, trying not to shake up the boat too much. And he described it a little bit as a QC pass and a cleaning up of the work that was done by SDS. And I think I agree with that, and I think he's executed that pretty successfully. As I was mentioning there in my previous comments a minute ago, some factions are definitely worse off than others, and this addresses most of them. We'll be talking about the individual factions here in a minute, but I think he did a pretty good job and with everybody that contributed to this, did a pretty good job in fixing some of the most glaring issues. And another sort of thought that I have now is I'm pretty impressed / happy, I guess, or surprised that there's been so much uptake on this pack. We are already seeing the list builders online adjusting to be able to, for us to be able to make lists with the Renegade pack, as it were. We've seen it used in an RTT here locally over the last weekend, and other tournaments are talking about it. So overall, I think this is a success. What are your thoughts on this, Ryan?
Take a slightly different tack here, but it's so I have no issue with basically any of the content that was done. However, I don't think what the pack does achieves the aim of how it's being promoted. Like, there's a lovely 2-page introduction that's been written on it where it says what Val set out to do and all of this. And the pack very nicely meets that. Like, it as a document is very internally consistent in that front. And it's very clearly like it's a bit of a forcing function to the wider community. The uptake on this means Games Workshop has to do one of two things. They either ignore it and quietly drop the legacy factions, at which point this project continues to develop them, or they turn around and they actually do something, and then Val winds up withdrawing this pack like he says he will right in the last paragraph. So, like, all that's cool. Where I get a little tripped up is the larger online narrative that is not necessarily coming from the originator of this document, which is that its intended purpose is to quote unquote fix the legacy factions thus enabling and encouraging more people to play them. As we go through this, you will kind of get my 2 cents on how it is definitely not actually accomplishing that, but that wasn't its goal. But that's how it's trying to be sold to some people. So just something to be aware of. But all in, like, I don't have a problem with any of the content in the document. I just don't think it needed to exist. But at the end of the day, now that it does exist, I'm not going to sit here and be grumpy about it. So,
Sorry, I was muted there. So I don't follow all the online Facebook groups that you're talking about, Ryan, but I will say I agree with you in terms of like I don't think Val's intent here was to encourage people to pick these factions up. I think he had one episode where he did discuss it, and he was saying that there's an underserved, potentially disenfranchised portion of the player base, and I think his efforts were not to fix the factions overall, because having looked at them in detail, I could tell you that the glaring issues with the factions still exist in terms of like having the right tools to bring to the job when they're competing against some of the higher tier factions in the not legacy armies. His intent was more to correct some of the glaring holes that were just, I think, omissions on GW's part, because it's an unfinished document. And I think he did do that properly. So I like the distinction that you're making,
yeah.
Ryan.
And yeah, so I agree with everything you're saying. I guess to wrap up where my perspective's coming from is like, as someone involved in tangential to event organizing and now technically also event organizing, within minutes of this being published, I received both public and private messages saying, "Are we going to use this? You really should use it. It's here to make legacy factions better so that maybe we'll have more list diversity at the event." And then I kind of was like, it doesn't do that. Why are you making this argument? But so like, that runaway train of internet telephone game understanding of what something is, that's
Sure.
just all I'm trying to get ahead of in this discussion.
Yeah, and I know you're not the only TO locally who's been asked about this, but what I think our perspective is kind of skewed because we are geographically very close to where this document originated, and the player base with Toronto, essentially between Toronto and Ottawa, is go to the same events and know each other. So like the uptake in this community is much bigger than I think it's probably is around the world. So I know it doesn't really help with the issue you brought, but if you were a TO somewhere in Europe, you probably would not have had the same amount of messaging and comments about this. Yeah, so there's probably a geographical factor here.
Quite possible.
Okay, so Andrew, what are your thoughts on the pack overall? Like, yeah, what do you think?
I'm kind of torn because like I like what this sets out to do for the game and sort of keep those legacy factions relevant as we get more arcane journals that sort of not only makes new lists for current armies, but also a lot of the choices in those books also feed back into the grand army for that faction. So it's not, even though it's not like a straight like upgrade for that list making it better, it does give more options. Whereas, the Renegades probably, unless we're super lucky, maybe second edition, won't see an update ever. So I like that it kind of keeps them at least interacting with the rules as they are on a more even keel with those other armies. It's just, I always have a hard time being very receptive to fan made content. Now, this is obviously very well made, but at the same time, it's like, it's still something that a community member made. So, like, why is this better than other proposed fixes or some of the other, like, legacy / renegade army books that have popped up as well from fans? So it's like, I don't know. I'm still like torn of like how much I like this. Like I like what's in there, but it's are we giving this more credence than the other fan made stuff?
Because he has the biggest soapbox.
Yeah, well, maybe, but like, yeah, I guess that's probably it. But
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
think it's just what Ryan's getting at is there was an ability to sort of rally the community behind this one that perhaps others didn't have, and sometimes just being the first guy to show up in force makes you, the default solution, right?
yeah, I guess. All right, let's just cover this thing.
All right. Okay. Perfect. So we talked about all this. Let's roll into the first faction in the pack, and that's one near and dear to my heart, Chaos Dwarfs. So I think I will start off by the way we're going to be doing this, listeners, is we're going to be doing it sort of in two parts. We're going to be looking at the changes to the army list, and then after that, we'll be looking at the rules changes separately. So I'm going to kick us off here with the changes to the army list. So there's a few, off the top of my head, five changes here. So the first one, so there's no changes to characters except for one that was removed and put in rare, which I'll cover in a second. In terms of core, there's been some changes. So, and you'll see this throughout all of the armies we're going to be covering this evening. There's the limitations that force you to take, or the restrictions that force you to take one of per army. For instance, in the case of Chaos Dwarfs, Infernal Guard, but it could be Ogre Bulls or it could be Saurus Warriors. Those have all been lifted, and it's the case here. So Infernal Guard are no longer a 1+ choice, which is good and interesting. Additionally, there's the option to take 0 to 1 units of Infernal Ironsworn in core if your general is a Castellan, and if there are no Black Orcs being taken by your army. Additionally, in rare, I mentioned it earlier briefly, the Bull Centaur Toruk has been moved to rare and his restrictions have been changed. It used to be 1 per unit of Bull Centaurs. It's now 0 to 1 per 1,000 points. So it's modeled a little bit off the Dragon Ogre Shartak. Sorry, not Shartak, but the what's the name, guys? The Shago, thank you. And then additionally in rare, the other change is Chaos Giants are now 0 to 1 per 1,000 points. These were previously not an option for the Chaos Dwarf army. They're taken from the Beastman Brayherd's army list in this case. There's also a change to mercenaries. So Bone Grinder Giants, you can now get 0 to 1 of those in your army. That was not previously the case. And then finally, we have an additional ally that is now linked with the Chaos Dwarf book, and that is Demons of Chaos. So the allies are now Warriors of Chaos and Demons of Chaos. So those are the army list changes. Sorry. Ryan, do you see any standouts from the changes? And then how do you see them impacting some of the lists, or how do you think they may impact what you see on the tabletop?
I like being able to take a unit of Ironsworn in core if you don't take Black Orcs. I'd have all, and you require an Infernal Castellan, yeah. So like if you want to make the like Tsar Nagarund, army, you got kind of a cool option to do that. And since you don't have to take Infernal Guard, I guess you could also just take 8 billion Hobgoblins.
Sure, yeah. A lot, yeah.
You could just make the weirdest Orc and Goblin army without being Orcs, which is actually kind of funny. But whatever.
Yeah.
That's cool. The Bull Centaur Toruk in rare, I find to be an interesting choice. Purely because, like, I get the comparison to the Shaggoth, but unless the Bull Centaur Toruk also becomes a monstrous creature and, very different, it's not like it's like an apple and a pear. Like they're
Sure.
similar things, but they're like not so similar. But I guess yeah, like with the Toruk being in rare, you might actually take one. in,
Yeah, exactly.
'Cause in the character allotment, it's definitely not getting taken. Bone Grinder Giant, just a nice quality of life pick, and I love the demon allies like that. That just makes sense. So, um, I
Yeah.
actually don't think this is going to have like a groundbreaking impact on army design for the Chaos Dwarves. I just think it's all nice.
Yeah, that tracks with what I'm going to say here in a minute. Andrew, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, like my biggest standout was the Infernal Ironsworn being able to be taken in core. I think we touched on that when we did the Chaos Dwarf review. It'd be nice if there was an option for that.
Yeah.
So seeing that come up now is pretty sweet. Other than that, there's not too much like crazy groundbreaking stuff. To touch on the Bull Center Torek, I might be misremembering, but I think in 8th they were for some reason in the rare slot. So that's probably why he put it there again. Although I might be misremembering that part, but I kind of remember it being like weird that it wasn't in the character allotment.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not super familiar with the Kalsdorf list in 8th. I was playing another army at that point, but I think Val did base himself on previous editions quite a bit, so that would make sense. Okay, yeah. So my thoughts here. I like it. I like it in general. I think the changes are not too massive, but they open up the build variety that you're going to see in the army. And that's, I think, definitely something that's super positive. It shakes things up in terms of list construction, and not just because of your core being shaken up by no longer having to take Infernal Guard and then having the option to take Infernal Ironsworn. But it just again opens up new options and fun things to play around when you're designing your list. I think the changes that Val has made here make the infantry Death Star, regardless, like that archetype of a list, regardless of how good you think it is actually kind of an option now for this army. So you can accomplish that both through Infernal Ironsworn or Blackworks, I think, are both effective bases off of which to build that list. I don't think it's that good from a competitive sense, but I think the option is now there, and I'm happy that it's there. I don't think overall the best lists are going to change very much. There's one very notable exception to that, and we'll talk about it when we get to the rules changes after. But I think overall, you're still going to see lists that have Sorcerer Prophets often mounted. You're still going to see probably a pair of Iron Demons because there's such a crutch for this army. And you're probably still going to see some Blackworks and Core, or if you're a weirdo like me, some Infernal Guard still. But you're probably going to see once in a while some Bull Centaur Tauruks in showing up in the rare slot now that they don't take up character point allotments. They, with a great weapon, they're strength 7, and they could be easily toughness 7 if you want them to, with 360 degree charge arcs and movement. That is a nice little secondary beat stick type character that the army previously didn't have. And that's the other thing that I'm going to be mentioning now and a bit later is the changes to the list here have really opened up that role in the army that previously didn't really exist of a secondary beat stick character, something like a noble on Griffin or that kind of level of power character. So yeah, overall, I think it's good stuff. I think there's a few things that could have changed, for instance, or additional changes that could have been made. For instance, the Hobgoblin Wolf Riders, I don't think should be limited to 0 to 1 per Hobgoblin con that's taken. You don't see them as it is already. And then adding an extra tax of a character, which admittedly I like and is a good character there, but having that extra tax probably doesn't help them show up at all. So I would definitely lift that in the future, just for again seeing some good list variety show up if Val does go through a second time. And then I think you could also make, for instance, the Hobgoblin cons eligible to be BSBs, which they're not in this pack either. I think that would be a good thing to look at too. So yeah, overall, I'm happy with this. It opens up list construction, and I think it's good stuff. Okay, let's talk about the rules changes for the faction. So, Andrew, can you go through? There's very few in this one, but can you go through them, please?
Yeah. So for Infernal Guard commanders, um, it says add may replace heavy armor with full plate for 3 points. And then an Infernal Castellan, which is your expensive fighty character. He can be mounted on a Bale Taurus or a Great Taurus. And the Infernal Seneschals can be mounted on a Great Taurus. So that's like your low level fighty character. And then the change for Kadai Fireborn, they get 3 wounds instead of 2 now.
Yes, that's correct.
And they get the special rule Born of Fire. This one is straight up pulled from 8th. So Kadai Fireborn have a 3-up ward save against any wounds suffered that were caused by an attack that has the Flaming Attack special rule. And those are the only 2 changes for Chaos Dwarf rules. I guess
Awesome.
the biggest one being you can mount your fighty character now on one of the sweet Bale Tauruses.
Yeah, absolutely. So jumping in here just for a sec. So the change to the Infernal Guard commanders is really the most significant thing in the Renegades pack for Chaos Dwarfs. So the being able to get full plate is great, and the fact that they couldn't before was kind of weird because they were supposed to be leading or thematically leading Infernal Ironsworn, which are in full plate. So I think that one was just an omission. So I'm glad that's fixed. However, the mounts is kind of a big deal. The more I build lists and I look at this and I'm starting to test this out. So I think the Infernal Castellan on a Bale Taurus or a Great Taurus, you probably won't see very much of. The reality is, unless like you just want to bring that model. From a competitive standpoint, the reality is the Black Orc War Boss is just a better beat stick than an Infernal Castellan. It both has a better stat line. It has higher weapon skill, has an extra attack, so it's just better from that perspective. Although the Great Taurus is better than a Wyvern on its own, but all that being said, the reason why you're going to see the Black Orc War Boss way more often still is just Orcs and Goblins have a much better magic item list to pick from than Chaos Dwarfs. Chaos Dwarves have no weapons that you want to take on this guy. They have no ability to give him a regen save. They have no ability within the faction really to give him a ward save. So like that's just very difficult. Of course, you can increase his toughness, but in a world where cannons exist and where enemy lords are often strength 7 when they attack you, and a number of dragons are strength 7 in fact, just increasing toughness on its own is probably not enough. And then the last nail in the coffin is that an Infernal Guard Castellan on a Great Taurus is way more expensive than a Black Orc War Boss. So I think that guy you won't see much of. The one that I think is super interesting though is the Infernal Seneschals on Great Taurus. And that one is a good, like I was mentioning before, a secondary beat stick or like utility character that you could bring to the table for not very many points. So the Seneschal starts at 60 points, and the Great Taurus is at 120. So you can have a 180 point character, like let's call it 190 with like the full plate and the great weapon there, just running around. He's striking at strength 6. The character, the mount, has some attacks at strength 6, some at strength 5, is like fly 10, has fly 9, sorry, has furious charge, has terror, has like ward save, like some ward saves against fire and stuff, and does fire damage when it's in contact with models. I think it's just a good piece. It can also be your BSB. So you have a flying mounted BSB giving out, there's a banner, the Lamasu's Beard, that gives out ward saves against shooting to the army. So I think you're going to see that potentially as an option. And you may even see like a trio of these guys for like 189 to 210 points, just flying around in support of a caster or in support of a Black Orc War Boss. So I think they're really going to impact what you see in lists, and I think they're a really interesting piece. I don't know how good they'll be. I'll reserve judgment until I actually test them a little bit more, but I think that's really interesting. Closing my comments out with the Kadai Fireborn. I don't think this is really going to matter much, frankly. They were atrocious before. I think they're just sort of bad now with this increase in wounds and the word save against fire. I don't think you're going to see much play. I will test them again, but I don't think you'll see much play because they're extremely flimsy. And they don't have Swift Stride, they don't have Countercharge, they don't have sort of any of those rules that you want them to. So they're just really getting shot to bits before they get to attack. And they're going to have the problem that was fixed with demons, spoiler alert, where they have the old demon ward save. So they're going to die to magical shooting and unbind pretty quickly too. So that one I think is a bit of a non-issue. Okay, so what are your thoughts on these rules changes, Ryan?
Like, I generally agree with you. Like, I like the full plate for the Castellan. It makes sense, or for the characters in general. I don't really care about the character on Taurus. Like, it's a cool as shit model, and like
Yeah,
just the ability to use the model is the part that makes it worth existing to me.
agreed.
Whether it's good or not, whatever. But Forge World, fucking metal album cover winged bull is just great. Kadai Fireborn are still like real bad.
Yeah,
like
turn
like 3-up against flaming attacks that no one has unless they're forced to. Is a thing, and the extra wound, even like because there's still what, like 35 points a model.
Close to that. It's
Oh.
123 for 3, I believe. So like 40 points a model. Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah, so they cost more than Grail Knights, and they're not good.
They're terrible.
like they're just really bad.
Yeah.
But like
Yeah.
that's one of those units that like the only way to fix them is like a ground up rewrite that's way outside the scope of the project Val set out to do.
Yeah. Agreed. And the thing is, if they're meant to be like glass cannony things that you can throw at the enemy and do damage and then just die, like great, that role doesn't really exist in the army, but they don't have the rules to support that. Right now they're just glass but no cannon. Yeah. So
Like if you made them ambushers that had like a fiery shooting attack or something, I don't know.
or just give them Swift Stride so they can at least strike once before they die.
Sure.
You know?
The rule that you and I have both spent hours explaining
Yeah,
shouldn't
okay.
exist.
Countercharge. They have good initiative, and then they can actually attack before they die.
Fair enough.
Like that'll be fine. Okay, Andrew, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, like I'm most interested in obviously the mounts for the characters. I think that's the coolest part.
Yeah.
And again, I think that harkens back to something we did touch on in the Chaos Dwarf episode, where it was like this fighty character is kind of neat, but he's so slow, he's never going to be able to fight. It'd be nice if he can be mounted on one of these sweet bulls that the Chaos Dwarfs have. So now you have that option. I still think you can make a fairly decent fighty character out of him with, generic magic items and the few things that are good in the Chaos Dwarf list, but you're probably right where the black orc war boss is still probably the better choice. But if someone wants to be a Chaos Dwarf purist and not take like the goblins and the orcs in the list, like it is a good secondary option for that. So that's kind of an exciting design space, at least in my head.
Yeah, and to be fair, like I completely agree with you, Andrew. I was looking at it from like the best possible option, but like I will absolutely run this guy because the model's banging and it's super cool, and he's not terrible either. He's just not as good. But I think like the hero sort of level one on a mount is, I think that one's got plenty of play though.
For sure.
Okay, awesome. So good. Let's park Chaos Dwarfs and let's move on to Demons of Chaos. Ryan, you want to describe the numerous changes to the army composition list?
Yes, so you can now take 0 to 1 greater demon of any type per 1,000 points and per unit with the same demonic alignment. So you can have, so instead of just being limited to one greater demon, you can now have 2 greater demons as long as you take the appropriate tax of relevant other demons. So like if you got 2 units of Bloodletters, you can have 2 Bloodthirsters. You got Bloodthirsters and Pink Horrors, you can have a Keeper of Secrets and a Bloodthirster. Whatever you want to do. I like it. I think that's just a cool, like, collection of options. In core, you can now take Bloodletters, Plague Bearers, Demonettes, and Pink Horrors as unrestricted core choices. I actually don't know what they were before, so I
It
don't know
was
how they're different.
yeah. So before, the only unrestricted one was the Furies, and then all of the base demons were linked to the mark of your general.
Okay, cool. So you can just
Yeah.
take demons as demons.
Yeah,
Love it. That's cool. And then special, it appears like everything is just now delinked. So you can just take whatever
Yes.
demons you want. Flesh Hounds, Blood Crushers, Nurglings, Beast Nurgle, Seekers, Fiends, Secret Chariots, Horrors, Brimstone Horrors, Screamers, Flamers. It's all just delinked from what's leading your army. So you can really take that true like mixture of everything sort of chaosy army.
Yeah.
And then you just have rare highlighted, and I don't actually know what changed.
Oh, it's because they moved a ton of units out of rare, actually.
Okay, yeah. So your rare section is now just 1 skull cannon per 1,000 points, plague drones, hellflayers, burning chariots, and soul grinders.
Because the remainder of the stuff was mostly moved to special.
Okay, cool. So basically, it's now no longer this like kind of ham-fisted mono god system. It's more of a like you're taking a holistic chaos army with a whole bunch of different capabilities, but you can still build the mono god army without having your hands tied.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have any problems with any of this, and I know Danny, who's been playing chaos as long as I've known him, was a huge influence on a lot of these changes. So
Yeah, I think he supports a lot of this. He's fully in favor of a lot of this stuff. Andrew, what are your thoughts on like how this army list has changed, and do you think it'll show up differently on the table when you face the army?
Yeah, I think it's like good that you're sort of not being forced to take those mono god lists anymore. I know a lot of people probably still will because of theme and you know a lot of chaos players seem to have their favorite god of choice. Um, but it's nice to be able to do like sort of that more generalized like demonic incursion force and not be having your unit choices limited by what leader you brought. So I think it's a lot of cool space now in this list for making like really cool different armies and sort of having like more competitive choices all together in one list. So I think it's going to be a very good power buff for the demons.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think two things here in general, Andrew, is like being able to take more than one greater demon, I think is a really good move that will help the faction a lot. Like every other army can take 2 bait sticks if it wants to, so why not these guys, right? And they definitely needed this kind of shift, so I'm happy to see that. And then to get more back to your point, Andrew, like delinking of the monogod system, which I think is sort of how GW's evolved over the last few years. If you look at AOS, if you look at how demons are depicted, for instance, in the Total War games, and going back towards the like quote unquote more old school demons of chaos, like as a mix type force. I think, like, theoretically, I'm more on the mono god side of the argument, and like, because I think it just visually makes more sense, and from a theme perspective makes more sense. But I will say that, like, as far as gameplay goes, this is the right move. The army, like, desperately needed a little bit to be sort of let free a little bit to build lists in a more interesting way. So I'm super in favor of the changes that have been made here. Um, Ryan, before we move on, any other points from your end?
I'm good.
Okay, perfect. Let's look at the new rules. So I'm gonna read them off here. There's quite a bit, so bear with me, guys. And I'll just provide a quick commentary throughout. I won't wait till the end there. So the most important change is the one on top, the first one that shows up. So the demonic save, the 5+ ward save, no longer disappears when there's a magical attack. I think this is pretty significant for the army. They're an extremely flimsy army, Demons of Chaos, so this will go a long way towards increasing, I think, their viability and competitiveness. Then Demon Princes get a 5+ regen save, which basically lines them up with the Warriors of Chaos Demon Prince. I'm in favor of that move. All greater demons get close order, which for some reason they didn't have, but they should because they're behemoths, and basically all other behemoths have close order. So I think this is just an omission on the part of the game's designers. Fleshhounds of Khorne now have Swift Stride. I think this is interesting. So Fleshhounds are basically a speed bump unit. They're decently hard to kill, but they don't do a lot of damage. Without Swift Stride, they were not, I think, super effective. I'm kind of interested to see how they shake out with this rule. Being able to actually charge stuff to sort of lock it down is going to be nice, although they do have Impetuous, so that may be an issue. Pardon me. There's been a base change on the Palanquin of Nurgle to allow it to enter a unit, which is fine. Nurglings have scouts, which I think will make them a lot more useful than they currently are. They're like great to tie things down, but having the ability to deploy them sort of forward on the board or behind your enemy's lines if he leaves some sort of places not zoned out there is gonna come in handy for an army that is generally quite slow if you're not playing Slaanesh. So I think that's good. The Hellflayers get AP1 impact hits. I think that's fine. I think these in general the Slaanesh chariots are too fragile to really be sort of the what you build your competitive list around. So the AP1 will help, but I don't think it's going to make a massive difference. Blue Horrors of Tzeentch get skirmishers, which sort of makes sense. I don't think it'll really rock the boat too much, but like as an interesting little rule there. The Skull Cannon gets a 360, so it just is brought in line with the mainline factions where mounted, like where cannons on chariots no longer fire at 360 and they have sort of a line of sight now. For instance, the Steam Tank and the Iron Demon have this rule. So the Skull Cannon of Khorne is just being brought in line with those other units. So what are your thoughts overall on all the changes to demons? And then do you think this will improve the sort of viability of the faction and just the fun of playing with it, Ryan?
Like I like pretty well most of it, but like the like not getting your ward against magic has been a thing for demons across Games Workshop systems for a long time. But I also totally get why you'd want to move away from that in the old world when like Fireball just deletes a unit.
Yeah.
So whatever. It's a gameplay benefit. Same thing with the regen on the Demon Princes. They're expensive enough. Getting it's not gonna upset me horribly. Though those two things combined together, I'm like, I'd have been fine if Demon Princes weren't getting a permanent 5-up ward and regen for literally no adjustment to anything is kind of beefy, but whatever.
Yeah. But it's in line with the Chaos, Warriors of Chaos, Demon Prince.
Oh,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, and those things really should just be copy pastes of each other. So I agree. Greater demons getting close order. My reading of the lumbering rule didn't actually require that, but for the sake of clarity, whatever. Flesh hounds with swift stride, cool. That makes sense. I don't care about the Pelican of Nurgle.
What?
Nurglings. Well, I just mean like I don't actually know what base size it was supposed to be on, so changing its base size is a meaningless line item for me.
As someone who rebased their demons, I can tell you it's annoying that it didn't fit before.
Yeah.
Nurglings with scouts. Sure. Like, I don't get the theme of that option, but okay.
The theme was like in the lore and shit. When demons and Nurgle becomes powerful, Nurglings just kind of start growing out of any sort of disgustingness. So
Okay,
like,
cool.
say it was like a
Yeah,
city, they'd start just growing in your outhouses as
sweet.
like
That
the
tracks.
things got worse.
Okay.
Not
I'll
a
buy that.
positive sign. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Hellflayers, like again, giant spiky chariot should probably be pointy. That's
Yeah.
fine. Um, I don't think making blue horrors of Tzeentch skirmishers solves or adds any value whatsoever, but
Yeah.
whatever.
I think you're
Uh,
kind of like pushed down the road of taking a big block of them if you do go Zinch, and then you don't want them as skirmishers. So I think it's probably not going to have a massive impact.
and then yeah, this like I'm on like the skull cannon thing. You're gonna hear me say this repeatedly. Like they fixed it for the steam tank. They fixed it for everything else. If you're a heavy chariot and you shoot a fucking war machine, you shoot out your front. Like that's
Yeah.
just what you got to do.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Just before we close this one out, so I will say, like, I think overall this does address a number of issues with the faction. Like from my perspective of when I play against demons and when I look at their lists, like there's three main issues with the faction that sort of like pop to mind immediately when I look at them. Is first of all, they're super flimsy. I would say that if your your enemy's army has any sort of amount of magical attacks, demons is probably the flimsiest army in the game. And this pack does go, some way towards fixing that by for instance, having the or primarily by having the ward save no longer disappear to magic attacks. So I think that helps. The second big issue previously was that list construction was super restrictive, and that's been lifted. So good news for demon players. And then finally, my other issue is because they're not called magic items, but they're equivalent to magic items are not that great. Not having access to the common magic items really sort of hurts the faction and prevents you from patching over some holes. That's still there, but I think overall, demons did sort of walk away from this with a pretty big power boost. Okay, let's move on to Lizardman. Andrew, you want to go through the changes to the composition list for Lizardman?
Yeah, so Slan Mage Priests are now changed to 0 to 1 choice per 1500 points. Okay, I see what happened here. Skink Priests were moved out of the 0 to 1 choice slot per 1,000 that the Old Bloods were in, so now you can just take them whatever. In core, 25% of your points can be spent on Source Warriors. I believe before it was a 0 to 1 choice, correct?
Yeah, it was 1+, so you needed to take
Plus.
them.
Oh, so you had to. So now you don't have to. Okay.
Yeah.
But you can take 0 to 1 Temple Guard if your general is a Slan Mage Priest in your core allotment. For special, Uh, Temple Guard, Pterodon Riders, Riprodactyl Riders, Bastillodons, and Stegodons were moved to special.
Yeah. So previously there was like some restrictions. So Temple Guard, for instance, could not be taken. They could only be you could only have one unit in core. Now you can have
Okay.
multiple units of them, for instance, and then all the other ones were just had a bunch of like 0 to 1 restrictions per hero.
I see. I got you. Okay.
Yeah.
And then rare, Salamander Pack, Razordon Pack, Troglodon, and Ancient Stegodon also had their 0 to 1 restrictions removed. So now you can just fill up your rare with whatever you want.
Yeah, so just a bunch of restrictions removed.
Which I think is good. Having looked at the previous Lizardmen list, it did seem very having your hands tied when trying to make a decent list. So having all those restrictions removed, I think helps a lot with this army just straight up before we even get into some of the other rules changes for them. So I think any Lizardman player should be happy with this.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the Lizardman was an example of an army list that was extremely restrictive in how you had to build it. So I think Val definitely helped Lizardman players just bring their armies to the table by removing a lot of the restrictions, which I don't think made a ton of sense and are probably holdouts from like as Ryan was saying in the opening, the designers having put tools down quite early in the development process for this army. So I think lifting all those restrictions will really help like the variety of the lists that you see from Lizardman. I don't think the changes will significantly alter the list construction. Like skink skirmishers are still excellent. So you're still going to see a ton of those, and you're still going to see some carnosaurs because they're a good model. I think the only change that will probably happen now is you'll see more Solemn Mage Priests than you did previously, just because of some of the rules changes that we'll get to in a minute. But overall, it's just lifting a bunch of restrictions that I don't think had a requirement to be there. So I'm pretty happy with all of this. I get that like Solemn Mage Priests are kind of rare in the lore. I'm not sure. I think it should be 1 per 1,500 points. It could probably be 1 per 1,000 points, but I'm willing to see sort of how it shakes out at that point level. What are your thoughts, Ryan?
I agree with all that. Like a lot of the restrictions were completely unnecessary from either like a game balance or lore perspective. The only thing I probably disagree on is the mage priest. Like, if I can have exactly one duke per army, regardless of army size, I feel like Slann mage priests and dukes are probably both equal in rarity and notional
Sure.
related power. Um,
Sure, but how often is that even going to come up? Like, how many
oh no,
3,000 point games are you rocking up to, right?
no, but that's what I'm saying. Is in a 3,000 point game, I can still have one duke, and you can have two Slann mage priests. What I'm saying is, one per 1,500 points is fine. 0 to 1 per 1,000 points means you can always have two.
Sure. Yeah. Like, yeah, I'm not sold on it either way. Like, I agree with you from like the lore or sort of the feel theme perspective. So I'm willing to retract that statement.
And not to mention, like a skink priest is a pretty decent wizard when you get everything going.
Yeah. Can they? I don't think they can be made level 4s though, right?
I thought they could, but I could be
If they
wrong.
can, then I agree with you. It's a level 1. Yeah, it can only be a level 2. Can only be a level 2.
Yeah, you can get a sweet dinosaur ride though.
Yeah, which is
Anyway, I
big,
just
big
agree.
selling
Like
point.
there was a lot of restrictions that didn't need to exist. Removing them is good. So
Awesome. Any more comments on this, Andrew, before we move on to the rules?
No, I'm good.
Okay, perfect. Ryan, you want to go through the rules changes?
yes. So Firstly, and I'm just going to do my commentary as we go. Cold-blooded, replace text with, when required to make a leadership or break test, models with this special rule roll an extra d6 and discard the highest result. That is a change from rolling 3d6, discarding the highest result exclusively for fear, panic, and terror. I don't know how I feel about this because both armies that I play, that's a 60-point banner that every unit in the entire Lizardman army gets for free. All the time.
Yeah.
I'm not like I actually didn't have any problem with the cold-blooded rule. So I don't know what prompted this change. But
Yeah, I think
getting
it's a return to how it used to work. Right.
sure, but getting 3d6 drop the highest break tests is, last time my buddy ran the numbers, if I remember, is equal to or slightly better than re-rolling your break test.
Sure.
For free, which, again, Lizardmen are legitimately terrible in most regards, so it's not like the end of the universe. It just seems like like this is the sort of thing that I really take issue with in fan rules, where you can just do a complete dartboard miss and give something a very powerful rule for absolute free just because of vibes. Slann Mage Priest, litany of changes.
Yeah.
We'll go through them and I'll do some stuff. Okay, so their movement value is now 4. They are now monstrous infantry instead of monstrous creature. They can be on a 50 by 50 or a 60 by 60 or anything in between. They no longer have large target nor close order. Okay. They add the following 2 rules, which are bespoke to this pack. Wisdom of the Old Ones. Once per turn, the Mage Priest can re-roll a d6 when making one of the d6 when making a casting roll, and it knows an additional spell. So it gets a free spell familiar, and it gets half of the High Elf once per turn casting re-roll.
Yeah.
Sure. Magical space frogs are not as good at magic as elves. Got it. And then it is also on a pelican, which is not, for clarity, it's on a floating chair. No one's carrying it. The pelican allows it to join a unit with the guardian special rule, i.e. Tomb Guard. Or not Tomb Guard, Saurus Temple Guard. That's the word. Despite having the fly special rule. As long as the front rank is a minimum of 4 models, they can be placed in the second rank. However, they continue to confer the benefits to the unit in the form of leadership and special rules. So they got kind of like a Shield of the Lady thing going on.
Yep.
As long as this model is not in a fighting rank, they may cast and dispel as normal, but may not cast assailment spells. For the purpose of shooting and casting, they have 360 vision and ignore models. So they get all the benefits of being a thing, but can be in a unit. If the model of this unit is unable to fit neatly, okay, cool. There's just a bunch of explanatory text I'm not going to read about how you jam them into the unit. So first off, this doesn't in any way address how to solve the problem if you take was it like higher state of mind or whatever that makes them ethereal?
Yeah.
If you do that, I think they still can't join a unit, Pelican or not, because they have
I think
ethereal.
you're right. Yeah, ethereal wouldn't be able to. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're correct.
So I'm just going to go off on a bit of a tangent here, but I think this was a really complicated way to solve a problem. Like, I get the problem of like, you had a giant lizard that was a large target, and the only saving grace it had was putting Temple Guard near it, and on a 2-up, you could just throw wounds at the guard instead of at it. But, like, this paragraph of rules, instead of putting him in the unit, in my opinion, would have just been better served if you just said, you know, if Slaane's Mage Priest, with no other changes from the core rules, is within 3 inches of a unit of Temple Guard with a unit strength of 5 or more, cannot be selected as a target. Like, gains the regular character protection. Because now you have this weird situation where you have a rule that breaks like 4 other rules. And like, okay, cool, it has fly, but its fly rule is now completely irrelevant because it also just has movement 4 and is joining a non-flying. Like, it's just,
Yeah,
it's
a
a
lot of
lot
stuff.
of changes to accomplish something that I don't think was necessary to achieve the intent. But whatever. Again, not my army, not my problem. What do you guys think?
There's a second page of changes, Ryan.
God damn it.
Yeah.
Temple Guard, Initiative 2. What were they before? 1?
1. Yeah, Lizardmen are
Okay.
basically all the Saurus are 1 essentially.
Okay, cool. That, like, 2 or 1 doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of difference.
Sure.
Remove from
100%
Guardian.
increase.
Sorry?
That's 100% increase.
Exactly.
It's a
Yeah,
100% increase of still less than almost everything else in the game.
yeah, they now have Chaos Dwarf initiative. Loving it.
Yeah, and then they lose the rule that gives them area protection. So your higher state of mind, Slann, is not getting any protection from from being near stuff, other than by being a monstrous infantry character now, and therefore not targetable. And then it just says add joining a Pelican rule. Cool. Stegodon. Jar contains 2 or more engines of the gods. Delete something. I don't understand this thing about
Yeah.
obtain
So
configuration.
previously, you needed to have 2 engines of the god to get this rule to trigger, and now you just need 1, basically.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Was that because they were supposed to be like weird sun lasers that like focus light on
They're
things?
part of like a geomantic web of magic or whatever. Like, but
I get the theme, but yeah, from a gameplay perspective, sure. And then your salamanders now have a breath weapon that's
yeah, it's been modified.
still bad.
Yeah.
But
Yes, it's still
it's
bad.
now a column of fire, like a war machine, instead of just a breath weapon.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, okay, cool. So it gets a strength 4, AP -1, column of fire breath weapon.
Which is much better than just a regular breath weapon. So fine.
Back.
Yeah.
Uh,
But it's still pretty bad. Yeah. Okay. Is that was the
yeah,
last one, right?
that's it. Yeah, it's just
Okay.
whatever. It's the same mediocre breath weapon as everything else, but it's a column of fire now.
Yeah. Okay. Andrew, before I get going here, what are your thoughts on all these changes?
I don't know. I didn't know Lizardmen list. That was the army I read up the least about. So honestly, I don't know how huge a lot of this is for the army. Other like, I think the biggest part for this whole sort of renegade list changes is just the straight up changes to the actual army construction rules.
Yeah.
All this other stuff is just kind of like meh to me. And I kind of do agree with Ryan's critique of the Planquin. Like, it's a lot of rules to try to recreate something that this unit was able to do in the past, whereas like maybe we should have just let that go and gave them like Ryan said,
Can't
the
be
just
targeted.
not
Yeah.
can't be targeted, or even like that plus like if they're X amount of inches from the Temple Guard unit, the Temple Guard can like look out sir them or something like that and take the hit instead.
Well, that's what they could always do.
Yeah, they had
Um,
that previously.
well then that's fucking good enough. Why do we have to change anything?
Yeah, because they're super. Anyways, I'll get to it in a second, but keep going. Yeah.
Um, Other than that, like all these other changes, they seem very minor to me. Um, and it's more just cleaning up maybe um, ways where this list wasn't fully fleshed out when they stopped working on it.
Agreed. Yeah, and I think that's the way I also sort of look at this army, is that they were not finished when this legacy PDF was published. We've talked about the list stuff already. Looking at the rules here, cold blooded. I don't mind. So I know that we often complain on this show about people like, oh well, it used to be this way, so it should still be this way. I I get it. However, in this case, I'm not entirely against the change to cold blooded. Cold blooded was really pretty core to the identity of Lizardman. My regular opponent in 8th edition was a Lizardman player, and not being able to break anything in his army was kind of his shtick. And then the way that cold blooded sort of got transferred to the old world, now it just didn't do that much. So I'm not entirely upset to see that one changed. I mean, dealer's choice on if it was required or not, but like I'm not against it. I think Slan Mage Priests have definitely gotten a big glow up here, for sure. But I will start by saying that they were like in a terrible place already. They're extremely expensive as far as level forecasters go. And I get that you can make them ethereal, and they've got like a few little things going for them. But I mean, they're like, I'd rather have a high elf archmage or I don't know, a chaos sorcerer lord than a Slan mage priest by like a country mile. So them getting a bit of a buff is not terrible, but they did get a bit more than just a bit of a buff for sure. Like, so they have better casting now by being able to re-roll the dice, which is pretty clutch when you've got a specific spell that you need to sort of make sure goes off. They get an additional spell now. I will say it should probably say whether they're allowed to cast more spells in their wizard level or not, because a lot of those items that give you an extra spell specifically point that out. So maybe that's something to modify in the Wisdom of the Old Ones rule. The Slans are now more survivable because they can be in units. They're no longer monstrous creatures. So I think overall, like, a lot of changes to these guys. And I think there's now much more of a use case to see them in lists. However, yeah, I still think, like, from an internal balance perspective, I still think like your a lot of your character points are going to be sucked up by source old bloods on carnosaurs, because that's like a very good hammer unit in the army. So we'll have to see sort of how things land with the Slan Mage Priest, but I think there's much more of a use case than there was previously. So I think that's good because like, it opens up build variety, and I know that Lizardman players love their Slans, so have at her. But I do agree with you guys that there's a lot of changes here to accomplish this. Maybe something to look at in the future. I don't think that the changes to Temple Guard really matter much, frankly, aside from obviously being able to take the Slan in the unit. The Stegodon thing, I think, is totally fine. And I don't think, like, I used early in the edition a column of fire weapon that had, I think, essentially the same profile on the magma cannons, and they're terrible. So I don't think this makes salamander hunting packs much better than they were before. So yeah, I think one won't amount to much either. So overall, this is a good update for the Lizardmen, just because it makes army construction much more enjoyable, and there's now more of a use case for the Slan, regardless of how that was accomplished. So yeah, I don't think I don't think it's a bad move overall. So okay, let's move to the faction that
Sorry, I have
is.
one
Yeah, go
more
ahead.
like
Yeah.
lawn thing. Looking at all of this, it's a lot of changes, and like I'd have just been like wisdom of the old ones, reserve move, and maybe make them like toughness 5. Like
Yeah.
I
Yeah. They're
find like, the thing that grates on me is just the like I'm gonna make a pelican rule that necessitates breaking 3 other rules to exist. It
sure.
is like
It's
the
yeah.
part that gets me. Uh,
Yeah. Or if I could even be more reductionist, just drop the points. I know Val wasn't doing that, but like drop the points
yeah,
on him. Leave him as he was
we've
before.
hammered on that for ages. Like the way to
Yeah.
fix most of this game is points adjustments.
Yeah. But yeah, so like I get you, but anyways, I think the intent was good because it's a key part of that faction's identity that just wasn't seeing any play. I think we all agree that maybe that's not how we would have approached it, but hey, we weren't the ones writing it, so
You say
whatever.
that 6 times I've played lizard men, they didn't have a Slann in their army. Like every
Yeah,
lizard army I've ever played had a Slann in it.
they had. I've played both. And in every single match I play against Lizardmen that have a Slan, I'm killing that thing first. Like I'm
Oh yeah.
beelining
No,
right for
I
it.
magical arrowed archered that thing to fucking death. But the
Yeah,
point
exactly.
being was it's been in every lizardman army that I've played against.
Yeah. Okay, I think we've beat this dead flying frog to bits to death here. So let's just move on to Ogre Kingdoms. Okay, so Ogre Kingdoms. There's been comparatively few changes to this army list. I think it's a bit unfortunate. So in core, ogre bulls are no longer 1+. They're just you can take ogre bulls however many you want. In special, the scrap launchers have been delinked from the iron blasters. I think that's a good move. Like you never saw scrap launchers previously at all, just because iron blasters are way better, and they were competing for the same restricted slot of 0 to 1 per 1,000. So I mean, maybe you'll see scrap launchers now. And with the changes later on, we'll talk about maybe you see the rise of the Ogre Kingdom's gun line list with a bunch of scrap launchers, iron blasters, and mud belchers. Who knows? In rare, Gorgers used to have a restriction of 0 to 3. I don't know why that restriction was there previously. It didn't feel warranted, and most places, yeah, it didn't feel warranted, so I'm fine that it's been removed. Additionally, mercenaries they can now have a bone grinder giant, just like the Chaos Dwarfs can, and that's it for changes to Ogre Kingdoms. I guess I'll just do my comments right away there and give it to you guys. I wish there were more changes here. I think ogres kind of struggle as an army. Um, right now, I like the changes that have been made though, because I think not having to take the ogre bolt tax increases the viability of the Iron Guts Death Star build that you now have extra points to spend on. So that's fine. Aside from that, like I think that's the only real meaningful change. You may see more Gorgers because they're actually not bad, but yeah, I think that's the only meaningful change, and the army needs more than that. Like I would have liked to see, for instance, the restriction on Mournfang lifted. They're probably one of the only performing bits of that army. Actually, they are one of the only performing bits of that army. So like throw the ogres a bone here or an entire steak or feast that they can have because yeah they need it. That would have been like a first thing that I would have potentially suggested for this army. Potentially lifting the restriction on man eaters. Also, I mean, man eaters are so expensive as it is. If a person wants to go down the road of having 2 big, expensive units of man eaters, like let them go hog wild again. Like this faction just needs a little bit more love, as far as I'm concerned. So, what are your thoughts on this, Ryan? Sorry, yeah, Ryan. Yeah.
Yeah, so like all in, not forcing you to take ogre bulls is fine. Everyone always complained about them. You just
Mhm.
want to like all that means people are just going to fill their core with one giant unit of iron guts. Dealing in the scrap launchers, don't care. Like, cool. Probably still aren't gonna take them.
No.
To take because they got to take their iron blasters and Mornfangs.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
uncapping Gorgers in a world where 90% of events still use the rule of three does literally nothing.
Mhm.
And then they can take a Bone Grinder Giant, which is cool. And they can take Orc and Goblin allies, which is also cool. Um, I'd have almost gone out on a limb and like let them have more allies because of how like mercenary the ogre kingdoms are. Um, but that's here nor there. But yeah, like I don't think any of these changes in any way improve ogre kingdoms from like a competitive standpoint. I just think that they free up army construction for all the people that are real mad they had to take one unit of ogre bulls.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's probably the only meaningful change, as I mentioned. I think one other thing, sorry, while you were talking there, Ryan, that came back to mind is like I would have, well, that would be in the rules section later, but I'll just throw it out there right now. But potentially having gorgers in units of 1 to 3, for instance, would really sort of impact the list creation. They're I think they're an excellent unit, but having them as a single model all the time is kind of restricts their use. But yeah, what are your thoughts, Andrew, on how this impacts the army?
Yeah, like I don't even uncoupling the scrap launchers from the Iron Blaster. I doubt very much you're gonna see scrap launchers. They're not the greatest.
Yeah,
Um, I think like as you guys highlighted, the Ogre Bulls not being a mandatory take now is kind of like the standout here. If it was me, I would have uncoupled the Tyrant and the Slaughter Master from the same points allotment. So you can take like your Wizard and your Tyrant as opposed to having them take up the same slots.
sure. Yeah,
Other than that, like this seems fine. Giving them the Bone Grinder Giant is nice. Maybe that should have went into rare as opposed to having it be a mercenary.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. That's what I was thinking while you were talking. 100%. Like they're full of
But
giants already in the faction. So yeah,
yeah, like they're kind of the de facto giant army, right? So like, why not
yeah,
just make it a staple choice in the army as opposed to a mercenary? Although I guess mercenary isn't as bad as being an ally, but there is still some downside to that.
yeah.
So overall, like I think it's fine. Um, and realistically, like unless you're gonna change points around, like I don't think it was the lists so much that killed ogres. It's just kind of the overall ogres rules
Yeah.
that kind of
Agreed.
lets them down in this edition. So not
Yeah.
too much to say about this.
Yeah, they're slow. They don't have a lot of elite stuff. They die to basically a swift breeze. So like it's difficult right now. And I think you're right, Andrew. Like they don't have enough tools in the toolbox. Like there's not a lot of units here either, right? So there's only so much Val could do without creating new units, which he didn't want to do. So
Yeah,
yeah, I think it's rough to be an ogre player.
yeah.
Okay. So, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing with you.
Okay, Andrew, you want to go through the rules changes?
Yeah. So for lead belchers, you replace the rules for their lead belcher gun with a solid shot. I believe that remains the same. But they also get a change to their scatter shot profile.
Yeah.
So the strength is 4. It has an AP of 1 with an armor bane of 1, so you can potentially get 2. It has cumbersome and multiple shots 3. Um, Also, a change to the gun is the lead belcher gun now ignores penalties to moving and shooting, and the penalty for multiple shots. So I think their bliss skill is like 2 anyway.
Three. Yeah.
3? Well, it's
Yeah.
still pretty bad. So this just helps them be a little bit more viable on the board, and being able to like move and shoot and use those multiple shots I think is going to be a half decent buff to them, but I don't think they're still gonna be like just gunning shit off the board. Then excuse me, the Iron Blaster. So just again, it's bringing those cannons that are mounted on a chariot in line with everything else, so it loses the 360 line of sight. It can only shoot out of the front arc. Nothing big there. And then for Ogre Hunters, they get the special rule running with the pack. When a hunter joins a unit of Sabertusk, the unit may adopt or stay in skirmish formation despite the difference of their unit types.
Yeah, so they no longer force the Sabertusk to lose skirmisher. So
Right.
Yeah.
They could have
And
just gave the hunter skirmish instead. And whatever.
sure.
No, they tried to change his unit type, but
Right, fair
It's fine.
enough.
Yeah.
It's fine. So yeah, like nothing crazy big here. Obviously, I think the clear winner out of all these is the lead belchers. Just giving them a little bit more viability on the board. So that, if they are using that multiple shot or moving, their already bad ballistic skill doesn't get even worse. But like otherwise, like there's nothing, I don't think, groundbreaking here or anything that's gonna like super buff up the ogre list.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. Like, I just get back to my previous comments of ogres need more than this to have more, to see more presence and play on the tabletop. Like, to be clear, I like the change to lead belchers. I think they're viable now with the change to how the scatter shot works. So I was looking at it last night, and that scatter shot has the exact same profile as the fire glaive in my Chaos Dwarf army on the Infernal Guard. So strength 4, AP 1, armor bane 1. Except that it's got 3 shots and mine doesn't, obviously. But it's less than the cost of 3 Infernal Guard for a single lead belcher. So plus he has a baby cannon shot that has multiple wounds and strength 5 AP2. So I think overall it's not a bad unit. It's not like Sisters of Avalorn level of kick-ass shooting, but like I think you can probably run them a little bit more certainly more effectively than before, and they may see a little bit of play, but it's not enough to sort of rock the boat and give ogres much more of a fighting chance. Hunters it's cool that they no longer remove skirmish from their unit. Great, you may see them a little bit more now, but they're not much to write home about either. What are your thoughts here on this one, Ryan?
So I'm gonna diverge a little bit here.
Okay.
So first off, the change to the ogre gun actually makes them worse. Because it adds cumbersome to the scatter shot. So the lead belcher unit now has no possibility of ever firing defensive fire.
Oh, stand and shoot. Yeah.
Sure. And multiple shots 3 is better than D3 hits.
Yeah.
But but again, it is one of those like they had to give them a rule and then give them a rule to ignore another rule. Like just this list of things. And now, okay, cool, they have all this great quasi-offensive shooting, and they've lost the ability to stand and shoot. Which is what the scattershot profile was principally for when you kind of look at their original profile.
Sure.
Like, it's at best a lateral change, in my opinion. My ogre playing friend actually finds them to be significantly harder to use with the renegades options. So that's just
Lead belcher specifically, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah, that unit specifically. Yeah. Sorry, I'm caught up watching the aggressive Cathay
Sure.
release that's happening right now.
Are they showing Cathay stuff while we're talking?
Yeah, I'm gonna send you like a shit ton of pictures in a minute.
Oh, fun. Okay, all right.
The Iron Blasters, totally on board with them having to shoot to the front. That's fine. Hunters, again, it's a rule to break a rule. I get the theme. I don't really care either way.
Yeah, sure. You probably won't see many of them still. You didn't see them before, you probably won't see them now. Okay, let's move on to Skaven. Ryan, an army I know you've raged about a little bit how it was built. Why don't you go through the changes to the army list?
Okay, so 0 to 1 warlord, Skaven warlord per 1,000 points. 0 to 1 gray seer per 1,000 points. No restriction on warlock engineers, master assassins, or plague priests. You are no longer required to take 1+ unit of clicking rats. Oh.
You cut out there for a second, Ryan.
Sorry, I started coughing.
Okay.
And you have an or option between storm vermin and plague monks if you take a plague priest. No more restrictions on gutter runners, plague monks, storm vermin, or rat ogres. And if you take an engineer, you can take Jezzails and poison wind globadiers. So basically, they removed all of the take this character in order to do this thing options and just let you build an army like a normal person.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Andrew, what are your thoughts on these changes? Any standouts?
Just kind of everything in the character's allotment, unlocking all the stuff taking up each other's slots, but then also being forced to take your stuff in special depending on what you had. So this is gonna make. I think this fixes a lot of the complaints that Skaven players already had, where it's like, again, not the best rules, but then it also had one of the most like restrictive list building in the whole lot of armies in the game, which was just kind of like a double kick in the nuts for Skaven players to begin with. So I think this fixes a lot of those issues just right there, and that's not even going into some of the rules changes that are in this pack as well.
Yeah. So I agree with you. I think this fixes a lot of the issues that Skaven players have with their army composition list. Taking it from the top, I think delinking Skaven warlords and Grey Seers is a good move. Previously you couldn't have 3 like quote unquote lord level characters. Now you can. I'm not sure that really moves the needle on the army competitively, but at least the option is there, and I'm cool with that. I'm really happy that all of the shenanigans of like you need to take hero X to bring unit Y restrictions have been lifted. Those are just brutal, and just made Skaven list construction probably the most frustrating of any army in the old world at this point. So lifting all of that, I think, is a definite like positive move that I fully support. And that should probably have been done by the studio when they were doing a QC pass on this army, but that's neither here nor there. Clan Rats, actually, they had the worst core tax restriction of any army in Skaven, so you needed to take 1 unit of Clan Rats per 1,000 points. So you were at least in a regular game, anyways, bringing 2 units of Clan Rats, which they're not good at all. So lifting that, making it so you don't need to take any if you don't want to, is I think a good move. And then having so previously you could have 1 unit of Storm Vermin, but now it's only if you have a Skaven Warlord as your general, which I'm cool with. It's the same thing that basically they did to Temple Guard, essentially. Aside from that, like I'm also happy, there's just the option to theme your list here with like Plague Monks in core. Like they're not great again, but at least it's interesting. And then essentially just all of the restrictions being lifted on your special units is really the big game changer for this army. So yeah, no, just good. It'll really open up list construction for the for the faction. No longer having, for instance, Warplog Jazils be linked to like a single engineer per unit and stuff. Like all of that going away is I think definitely going to be a bit of a power boost for the faction. So like yeah, I'm supportive of this. This is all good. Ryan, any? Oh, you gave us your thoughts already. So let's move on to the. You didn't have anything else, did you?
Nope.
Okay, let's move on to the rules changes for Skaven. I'm going to do these ones. There's quite a few. So the first thing that they did is they changed the unit size for clan rats to be 20 plus, which is great. They also added the regiment keyword to clan rats and storm vermin. The reason why is because Val changed how weapons teams work. So now weapons teams are detachments and just work as detachments would with their parent unit. I think that's a much cleaner way of approaching weapons teams than how it was originally written up by the studio. So I do like that change a lot. People, at least locally here, have been talking about how there's the potential to see way too many rattling guns or whatever. But I don't think that's that big of a risk. Like even if you're taking 3, 4, 5 rattling guns, I don't think the army breaks in any way, shape, or form. And you still have less output than if you were taking, I don't know, 2 Hellblaster volley guns. So I'm not worried one bit about that. So yeah, I think that's a very good rules change. Actually, much cleaner. Help at abominations just being pumped up a little bit, I think, is good. T5 on that thing didn't make any sense to me, and then it's now T6, right? And then it has also impact hits being added, D3+1 impact hits for the help hit. Yeah, it seems like a big beefy mountain of rat meat that would be painful to get run in by. So I support that. I think it'll give help at abominations a lot more play in terms of on the table, just because toughness 6 is such an important breakpoint in this game. And Skaven have very, very little in the way of T6, especially in the monster category. So I think this is going to be super helpful to the faction. They are still quite heavily costed. I don't know if you'll see much of them, but they're more viable than they were before. The warp lightning cannon has been changed. So basically it does D3+1. So it's multiple wounds D3+1 now with magical attacks, which makes a lot of sense to me. And they've added a rule for warp lightning, and basically it reads as, so unless they're the closest target to the cannon, an enemy character that is within 3 inches of a friendly unit that contains 5 or more models of the same troop type cannot be struck by a warp lightning cannon, even if their base lies directly under the path of the line drawn from this model. So obviously the warp lightning cannon like fires along like a line that you draw on the ground. This is fine. Like it just sort of links. It just makes it so that the changes to cannons in terms of targeting characters, like warp lightning cannons, sort of works in the same way. So I'm also fine with that. The plague furnace has had its base size change so that it can fit inside units now, which is good. You'll probably see a lot more of it than you did before. And a few other little changes to drag along how basically Val impacted that rule. And then if the plague furnace is used as a character mount, it cannot use Verminous Valor. That makes sense to me. We've got last change here to the Screaming Bell. So the Screaming Bell's had his base size changed so that it could fit within units. I think that makes sense. And it can now be dragged, like it uses the new dragged along rule that Val has implemented for this. And it can be within a unit of clan rats or storm vermin, which I'm cool with. And it can't use Verminous Valor, much like the Plague Furnace. So a lot of changes here. I think what really is going to be impactful is the way weapons teams function, which I really like the changes in terms of cleaning up the rules, and then probably just seeing more of the Help It Abomination, because it fills a niche that is not well served in the current army list for Skaven. Ryan, what are your thoughts on all these changes?
I mean, most of it's fine. I mean, I'm the guy that put the bug out there to make weapons teams detachments, and then Cleary had to come rain on my parade and point out that detachments have to have a minimum unit strength of 5 to work. So that's a whole other problem. But like being able to take one detachment per unit of clan rats, like you're not spamming rattling guns without taking a shit ton of 20 plus units of clan rats.
Yeah.
Help and Abomination being tougher and doing impact hits is sweet. Warp Lightning Cannon not being able to snipe characters is fine. Much like the Slan, I think there were easier ways to solve the Plague Furnace and Screaming Bell problem that kept heavy chariots out of infantry units, but I'm too tired to go into a lengthy explanation of that.
Sure. Awesome. Andrew, any thoughts on these rules changes for Skaven?
I like the buff to Hell Pit. That was sort of one of their like centerpiece models in previous edition.
Yep.
I guess they came out in 8th. Or at least the current kit. So having it have that little bit of buff, I think you're going to see them on the table again because it is a piece that Skaven players do enjoy using. And it was kind of, they were in an unfortunate place to begin with in Old World. So like this, I think you're going to see them back on the table. Even if they aren't still the best monster, they're now actually like a fairly viable piece.
Agreed.
I do like the fixes too dragged along. I don't think we covered that at the beginning, so we might want to go back and just cover it right quick. To be able to put like the Screwing Bell and the Plague Furnace back in their units.
Yep.
As they
Yeah.
should be.
Maybe when you talk about Dark Elves later, because you have the Cauldron of Blood, you can go over those changes. Andrew.
Yeah, we'll do. Other than that, like this is all just seems like nice cleanups. Giving the weapons teams detachment, I think they're actually gonna see some play now. And it's not like they're what the fuck broken to begin with, so I can understand a bit of like the concern of giving them detachment, but at the same time, like they're not going to be game breaking. It's just going to be a nice little buff, to the units that they're attached to. So I think that's fine.
Agreed.
Other than that, like I think this is all good. I don't know if it like 100% fixes Skaven, but they're definitely in a better place with these changes. On top of the rules changes to list creation. So
Yeah, so I can tell you, Andrew, it doesn't fix Skaven, but at least it makes them less of an annoying experience to try to bring to the table for sure.
100%.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Let's move on to vampire counts. So there are no changes to the army composition list for vampire counts. So let's just go through the rules here. The first thing is the infamous and the much hated Wailing Dirge rule has been changed slightly, like a limited nerf to it, I would say. So now, essentially, the way that the rules change is that Wailing, if you're in base contact with an enemy, if you're in combat, you can only scream at the target, like at the thing you're in combat with. You can no longer scream out of combat. I think that's a good change. But like, I think that's a good change. Like, I support it. I think it's not going to matter too much on the tabletop though, because most of the things that scream are never really in combat that much in a game. Like, and you don't have any of those models that you want in combat if you're the Vampire Counts player. So, Mortis engines usually don't spend a lot of time in close combat. Certainly your Banshees are easy to maneuver out of range and make sure that they don't get charged. So there's that. And then your Terrorgeists, maybe you see them in combat more often, but they're like also not a great combat piece. So I think in general, Wailing Dirge took a bit of a hit, but it's not going to be as game changing as I think the victims of Wailing Dirge would like it to be. The next one I'm a big fan of. So the Mortis engine, for some inexplicable reason, still had stacking auras on both the +1 to move and the +1 to cast. Those have been brought back in line. You cannot stack two of those, like double of those auras, or triple if you're a madman. So you can only have a +1 to movement and a +1 to cast. I think that's a very solid and important change. Like the Mortis engine, frankly, is a bit broken, and it makes the vampires and vampire counts actually kind of irrelevant, as it were. So anything that sort of brings them back in line, I think, is a good move. They still get the buffs, but you just can't stack them, which is good. It'll open up the variety of builds that you see in the army too. Like not everybody was taking, to be clear, double Mortis engine, but at least that'll no longer be a thing. Vampire counts have had their leadership increased to 9, which means they'll now be the general of the army, which is good news, and they can take full plate armor for 9 points, which I don't know why they wouldn't have it already. The black coaches have had their base size changed, which is fine. I may be wrong here, but I think that's to align with the base size of the new black coach for AOS, but I'm not entirely sure. The Dark Acolyte, which is one of the vampiric powers, has been changed. So basically, you could still take this if you're not a wizard. So the way Dark Acolyte works is it basically allows you to do to resurrect models, do an invocation of Nehek. But now, even if you're not a wizard, you could still attempt it, which I think is good, and it makes the power useful or have a use case if you're not a wizard. So that's fine. And then finally, Dark Vitality has been changed in that your vampire counts and thralls can still wear armor and cast spells. So yeah, I think that's completely good actually and useful. Like I don't know why the vampire counts couldn't cast before. So yeah, this is all good stuff. I really like these changes. They clean up some stuff. They attempt to fix the two biggest issues with the army, as far as I'm concerned, which is screams being just uninteractive and unfun, and then Mortis engine stacking being a bit of a weird one since the rest of the game has moved on. So I support this. It's going to be, I think, a mild reduction in power to the army, but not much. It'll just make for a more pleasant play experience, and hopefully will broaden out your options, and you'll see a bit more of the vampires show up. Ryan, what are your thoughts with regards to this one?
I like it. Like it tones down some silliness with things. It lets vampires, if you choose to take them, kind of take the center stage within the vampire themed army.
Yeah.
And that's it. Like it's just very nice little quality of life touch up.
Awesome. That makes sense. Andrew, what are your thoughts on the changes to vampire counts?
So, like, the clear biggest winner here is the black coach can actually fit on its fucking base now. Like, what the hell was that?
Yeah.
No, but like, this is good. Like, it cleans up some stuff. It knocks back Wailing Dirge a little bit from its shenanigans. It's still a powerful ability, but it just has a little bit of a limitation now. Being able to not stack Mortis engine buffs, I think, is good. Other than that, like this is all fine. Again, like Ryan said, it allows you to actually have your vampire count be the center stage of the army, as they always have in the past, without sort of like the necromancers stealing their thunder. So yeah, this is all, again, this is kind of what I like about this document, is like these kind of light touches that just sort of fixes a few maybe mistakes that GW has made without going super deep into changing like the actual rules and the way the game works. So yeah, I like these.
Yeah, I think in terms of just straight up rules changes, vampire counts is like maybe one of the better cases in the whole sort of Renegades pack, where the changes are clean. They fix things that needed to be, like, problem cases that needed to be fixed, and then they sort of just broaden out the use case a little bit on some of the important units like vampire counts, like the vampires themselves. So I think it's a really positive one.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on to your army here. Andrew, why don't you walk us through the rules changes to Dark Elves? There's no changes to the composition list here.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna go back to Dragged Along.
Yeah.
This is a bit of a read, so bear with me here. So just for the drag along rule, it says add if a model with this special rule is also a character's mount, it may join a unit of infantry. If it does so, it must always be placed in the center of the front rank. Fairly straightforward. Um, if this model also has a large target special rule, it may draw a line of sight and may be targeted as normal. However, when a model with this rule is hit with a range attack, the enemy player must roll a d6 for each hit before making any rolls to wound. On a roll of a 1 to 4, the hit is inflicted upon the model with this rule. On a 5+, the hit is inflicted upon the unit it has joined instead. Character mounts with this special rule that are joined to a unit may not make a lookout sir rule. So this kind of supersedes the lookout sir for character mounts. Furthermore, if this model is a heavy chariot, while it is part of the unit, the model no longer has the lumbering rule, and may ignore it for purposes of joining the unit. Only one model with the special rule can join each unit, which it's good they added that. And then it just goes into talking about how fitting one of these dragged along models into a unit if the base isn't the proper size. So having said that, we can go back to the Dark Elf section. This also applies to the Scream Bell and the Plague Catapult. No, not the Plague Catapult. Plague Furnace. But it'll come into effect with the Cauldron of Blood in a second. So, back to Dark Elves. He's made a change to Murderous. So we replaced the whole rule with instead, in the first round of combat, a model with this special rule may re-roll any rolls to wound of a natural 1. And then there's a note. This rule only applies to non-magical weapons and does not apply to a model's mount, should it have one. If the model is using a magic weapon, this rule ceases to apply. So this one, I think, is straight up just the way the rule was originally written, based on like the Warcom article that specifically had this as an example, and how it made witches like super awesome. And then by the time the PDF actually came out, it was not the case. So I'm fine with this, because it makes witches and executioners just that little bit better. Although there's still infantry in a cavalry-focused game, so not the greatest. Next one, for character mounts, it adds the Dark Pegasus to the Dark Elf Dreadlord or Master, which is the hero level and lord level fighty characters. That's just a throwback to previous editions where they were always able to take that as a mount. Then for the Manticore, it adds +2 to toughness as opposed to +1. So I think that makes it a toughness 5 character instead of a toughness 4, which was always kind of weird, because it didn't mesh up with the high elf counterpart of
or Warriors of Chaos Manticore. Yeah.
The Warriors of Manticore doesn't add toughness, so a sorcerer on a Manticore is still toughness 4.
I think this was to be the same as the High Elf on a Griffin, because I think that one gives +2 toughness, but then it was weird that the Manticore didn't, so I think this just brings it in line with that. And then Cauldron of Blood, it just increased the base size to be able to fit in a unit of witches better, and for the blessings that it does, originally they were power level 2, now they're cast on a power level 3, which is a nice little buff to that ability. And then finally, the War Hydra, its serrated maws gain an AP of 1, because currently they have AP nothing, which is weird on a giant monster with sharp razor teeth. And that's it for Dark Elves. Nothing game breaking. Like I've said this a lot of times, maybe not on this podcast, but at least in chats with other players. I don't think the Dark Elves realistically are in a bad place, like rules wise. So these little tweaks just are kind of like nice quality of life things, brings them in line with the High Elves a little bit more, and actually makes the Murderous rule usable at all in the game, as opposed to just like a weird edge case where you might only want to fight with one dagger as opposed to 2. So yeah, another like quick, clean little fix up. The only thing I would say is like, I don't know if the master needed the Dark Pegasus. I know in previous editions it existed, but clearly it was left out for a reason in this game. Maybe it's because the model never existed. You always had to convert it. But like, I don't see a lot of builds where you're gonna put your Lord level character on a Pegasus, and like that weird like unkillable like dart master build just doesn't exist in old world. So it's like it's nice to have, I guess, but I don't think it was really needed.
Okay. Do you see a use case maybe for like a master on Dark Pegasus as like a sort of secondary utility character that could run around and just be annoying?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like in previous editions, like you were able to make like a master on Dark Pegasus that was like super fucking hard to kill and just like would rush in and like smack face. And
Yeah.
you can't really recreate that build in old world. Just the items don't exist and the points allotments don't work. So like I don't know why you would do it unless you want like a very mobile BSB or something, but you don't really use BSBs in like the elf list because their leadership's already super high. So like I don't know. It's hard. I'd have to like sit down and try to figure out a use, but I can't think of one like off the top of my head where I'd want a master on a Pegasus. For
Okay.
me, like the spicy thing is the Cauldron of Blood. Like
Okay.
having the buff be a power level 3, like you might actually get it off now. And
Yeah.
having it in the unit gives like the witches a pretty good like anchor point because it's toughness 5. I think 7 wounds when you put the hag on it, and then depending on what ability you give her, um, she can put out like a shit ton of damage plus the impact hits from the cauldron. And then like the buffs are pretty good too. So there's one that gives them furious charge. So now every witch in your front rank is fighting with 4 attacks if you get the charge off. One of them gives them a 5-up ward save, so right now they have 0 save. Like you look at them
Yeah.
funny and they die. So being able to give them that little bit of a save, I think will help keep that unit alive. So it is. I like the Cauldron of Blood stuff, and I'm probably gonna play around in that kind of design space.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think?
Ryan, what are your thoughts? You're muted or cut off or something.
Oh, I'm back.
Okay.
Okay. Overall, again, very restrained, very minimal changes. I like the change to murderous so that having 2 hand weapons actually matters. I still want to know why a Dark Pegasus costs 5 more points than every other Pegasus in the game.
Because it's dark.
It's dark.
Sure.
It's
Yes,
a
the
special
mandatory
topic
thing,
tax. Yeah.
I get the comparison to the Griffin. I don't really care. Cauldron of Blood being level 3 means it might actually do something.
Yeah.
The War Hydra is Andrew. Is that its only weapons profile on the serrated maw?
I believe it has a claw attack as well.
Okay, just because like there's like 9 other things in the game that all have a serrated maw, and none of them have an AP. So it's
Yeah.
not like the Hydra was the only thing that this was a thing for. That's my only
No,
like.
like the main thing with the Hydra serrated maw attacks is it was like 3 plus however many heads are still, or however many wounds are left on the model. So you can, like, you start off with like 8 attacks. And they're poison attacks. Are they? Am I thinking of the Cribbis?
No, they're
I only
not.
ever run
No,
the
no.
Cribbis because that's for me the clear winner between the two.
Yeah, it didn't
Yeah,
have it didn't have poison. It's just armor bane 1 and multiple wounds 2,
Yeah.
plus
yeah,
the
so
number of extra attacks. Yeah.
it's the inverse of like most other things, like the Griffin and the Hippogriff and all that. They have serrated maws, but they just make 1 attack with it. So I see the logic here that
Yeah.
it probably needs something else because you're being forced to make so many attacks with it instead of your wicked claws.
Yeah.
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 I don't know that this model is like this piece is very good even
Oh,
with this change. Like
it doesn't solve anything. It
yeah,
just like
T5 200-point
I
monster.
I was just curious why it and only it was getting an
Yeah.
AP rated Maw. Because the problem is like this is my like rules brain is like if you're gonna do that, almost change the name because like if you say serrated Maw in every other unit entry in the entire game, that means one very specific thing.
Sure. Yeah.
But that's all.
Gotcha. Fair. Yeah, for my part, I don't hate these changes. I think you're onto something here, Andrew. I think it's increased the viability of witches and their attendant cauldrons of blood if you take them overall, just by changing. So with a buff to murderous, with the cauldron being able to enter the unit, the cauldron casting at a higher power level, I think all of that together gives them a bump. I don't know if they'll. I know you don't run them like that, Andrew, but the most common build doesn't really have witches. Usually, it's more like dragons and just skirmish shooting. So I don't know if it's going to be better than that build. I don't think it is off the top of my head, with my limited experience of playing into dark elves. But still, like I like that witches have gotten a bit of a pump up, and it sort of opens up the list variety and viability here for the faction, so that's good. In terms of the Dark Pegasus, like I like this just because the like I enjoy like a cheap utility character on a fast mount, even better if it's a flying mount. You guys have played against me. I use a Hobgoblin Con in that way all the time, and I always get sort of value for the points. So having a Dark Pegasus with a cheap master on it, running around, killing war machines or charging ranged units or what have you, I think is like I'm just glad that it exists for the army. Somebody will be able to find a use case for it. Um, I don't think like your elves are too flimsy to really want to run your dreadlord, your general probably on a Dark Pegasus. Yeah, because it doesn't do very much for his survivability. So I'd keep it just to the master, and then the War Hydra stuff is whatever. I don't think it's a very good piece as it is. I think you're right, Andrew. The Charybdis is better, and even then, yeah, yeah. So, anyways, uh, good changes overall. I'm happy. I'm happy with that. Okay. So this concludes our review of all the Renegade pack. So any sort of closing thoughts, Ryan, on the pack overall?
No, I think I've said all of the things.
Perfect.
Actually, no, sorry.
Go
Closing
ahead.
thought is that despite my curmudgeonliness, I do respect and appreciate all the effort that Val and company put into this. Um, so like, good job overall. It's very restrained. It's very usable. Um, that's all.
Okay, Andrew. Any closing thoughts on the pack?
I honestly thought you were gonna say, despite all my curmudgeonliness, I hate this thing. But no, like I think my thoughts too are along the lines of Ryan. Like, sure, we can nitpick and like point out things that maybe we wouldn't have done or agree with, but overall, like I think this is a very positive document that does a good job, bringing the renegades back in line with some of the other main factions. And like I super appreciate all the work that Val and Co put into preparing this and making it like a fairly well laid out document. um and it'll be interesting to see like just how much this is adopted by the community. I know we've discussed using it at some of our events, and maybe at Capital City Bloodbath we can look at that. We probably won't do it for the team tournament just because we've already done a lot of the legwork for rules and stuff in that.
Yeah.
And I don't want to make changes at this point in the event, but definitely might look into it for future events if the greater community does adopt this.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense to me. I agree with both of you guys. I think so. I'm happy that this exists. I'm happy that somebody went and did the sort of legwork to pull it all together. I think Val went through a pretty collaborative process to get this all put together. Like he has a dedication bit in the early at the start of the document in the preface section, and he mentions all the people, like including the three of us. You know, this is not about us, but like thanks for giving people the credit where it's due, Val. So I think that's also good. I overall I like it. I think the attention is not evenly spread between armies, though. Like some armies I think have gotten a real boost in the shoulder in terms of their viability, and some others haven't. So I think Demons of Chaos are in a much better place than they were before. Not that they're more competitive necessarily by like a massive stretch, but the army is just easier to build and bring to the table. It's less flimsy. It addresses some of the core issues. So that's one of them. But on the other hand, some other factions like ogres, for instance, I think are left in the cold here. They're not really in a better place than they were yesterday, which I think is a bit unfortunate because they definitely needed the love. A lot of changes on Skaven. I don't know how far it's going to move the needle, aside from making it like less annoying to play with. And then on the other hand, some of them are just straight bangers. Like we mentioned it, but I think the rules for vampire accounts, like through and through here, is really, this is just all good fixes. Dark elves, I think we're all pretty in agreement too. So we'll see how it shakes out competitively. We'll see how much people pick it up, but overall, good work to Val and his crew of people who just submitted feedback and ideas. So perfect. So we were wondering if we were going to cover the reveals from this evening in just like fast, in a hot takes this evening, but it seems like things have gotten out of control during the preview show, and they revealed like 3 armies: the Beastmen, which we were all kind of expecting, Wood Elves, and then Cathay with a bunch of pictures. So I think we'll save that for a next episode rather than going on a massive tangent here. This has gone on long enough. So it's been a pleasure. Thank you for joining us this evening. And I look forward to testing this pack out. Any closing thoughts or remarks, Ryan?
Nope. My only comment is don't forget to check out various regional events. There's a wait list for Val's event in April at X-Planet Games. We still have a few blank spots for teams at Can't Hammer Team Tournament. Check out Danny's tournament at Canadian Tabletop Championships. Possibly my event at the Ottawa Old World GT in June. And, of course, Capital City Bloodbath at the end of the summer in August.
Yep, and this time I will actually put in the show notes the document you created of all these upcoming events. I forgot to last time.
There you go.
Andrew, any parting thoughts?
No, I think we covered it all.
Okay, perfect. All right, thank you for joining us, listeners, and we'll see you next time.